I've been in blockchain for 5 years. I think it's going to change the world. I think it's going to take a long time to do that. I started with Bitcoin ATMs. We started with a Bitcoin wallet. We dealt with banks. We dealt with regulators. And we sort of didn't really get anywhere. Courtesy of the fairly generous R&D scheme in Australia, we had like a inversely exponential runway. We kept going with our devs, and we kept kind of pushing on in that kind of sphere. We made a lot of money from blockchain consulting, which is mostly telling banks they didn't need blockchain, they needed a database and a team that could get stuff done. Whilst doing that, Sydney, which is where I'm from, prostitution is legal, as it is in the UK. Now, in this industry, it's very difficult for service providers to connect with clients. And mostly because of problems that could be easily solved with tech. So in this case, it's mostly about verifying ID, peer-reviewed mechanism, tracking the appointments, things that you'd consider fairly standard if it was a car company, if it was a taxi company, if it was an Airbnb, if it was a hotel company, right? You just want this standard infrastructure where a centralized organization does these things. But the biggest problems we had were payments and trust. So even in areas where it's totally legal, it's very difficult to get banking relationships. At that point in time, everyone who I was working with said, look, cool, go crypto, Bitcoin makes sense. At that point in time, both had massive stigma and both had huge UX issues. It didn't make sense to combine the stigma and UX from blockchain with the stigma and UX from adult. Fast forward about 18 months and the whole market's gone from basically crypto is dangerous, it's going to get taken away, the banks are going to shut it down, governments hate it, to this stuff's really interesting, how do I get involved, I want to make money. Fortunately, we were in the right place at the right time. Like, the adult industry is fundamentally broken. To look at it from one perspective, if you look at online entertainment, it's about $800 billion. Online content, porn, is about $2 to $4 billion. It's apparently 10 to 20% of the internet traffic. Now, those numbers just don't make sense. And the reasons are payments are broken. People would say, why would I pay for porn, right? The same thing we said for music, for TV, for whatever, 5, 10 years ago. We don't not pay for porn because we're too unwilling. We don't because we don't have privacy or there's no mechanism. It's either from coming from a tube site like MindGeek, who serves 12.5 pieces of pornographic material per person in the world per year, and yet their revenue is only $600 million. Because it's either that or it's $40 a month for a subscription that shows up on your credit card and it's the same stuff. If there was crowdsourced mechanisms for that kind of stuff, it would happen. Adult content performers make between $500 and $1,000 a day at the peak of their career. And that's typically for about a year if they're a female star. Now, if you had a situation where the performers and the content consumers could connect directly, you'd see that disappear. So I'll get back to my slides briefly. Adult industry is very, very broken. Crypto is a great answer to that. The cryptography and blockchain, it's going to change the world, but it needs a real use case. All of these use cases are very valid. They're going to take a long time. If you try and sit in a room with a bank to try and get something done, they can't. Let alone like a consortium where you've got 40 banks in one room, they're never going to get anything done. You need a use case that's working from the ground up. The reason Bitcoin's still around and it's still 35% is because it's being used. It's far from the best, it was the first, but it's being used and so it's evolving. You need a use case where this technology is actually going to be used. And that's where adult comes in. The next bit is why intimate. You could use Bitcoin, you could use Ethereum, you could use any other crypto for the adult industry, but people are not using it. The reason they're not using it is they need to be incentivized. Decentralized isn't great, it's going to change the world, but to get there you need some degree of centralization. Consumers are apathetic and lazy, and corporations want to make money. You need something in the middle to get there, and that's what we're doing. As a foundation, we're basically funding all the problems. We're a blockchain layer, right? We're blockchain agnostic. We sit on top of it. We're ERC20, and then we can work out where we are later. As long as we can solve those problems. Consumers and people in the industry don't care about forks. They don't care about which currency. They care about liquidity. They care about getting payouts the same day, and they don't want to worry about the tech. If we sit in between them and they trust us, that's the solution, the way forward. So that's how we got into this space. What's really, really, really interesting is trust and reputation. Payments are fine. We can get a great rollout there. We know the industry well. Thank you. But anonymous trust, or pseudonymous trust, which is very difficult to pronounce, is absolutely where I want to go. And the best use case for this is people who are meeting in person, whether that's a paid interaction, escorting, or whether that's dating. When people interact at the moment, it's either a trade-off between safety or privacy. It's either, here's my ID, you know exactly who I am and everything about me, or you know nothing about me, you've got no real recourse unless something goes wrong. Sitting in between that is basically the blockchain, where you can have this situation where you can know details about the person, or you can know how they've transacted, or you can trust them without actually having to know their specific details. And that's where intimate comes in. So if you look at this example here, you can basically issue an invoice before you meet with someone. So whether it's a paid dating interaction or a non-paid interaction, say dating, swinging, if you're going to deal with someone and meet in a situation where you want to know You can trust them, but you don't need to know the details. You can do that. You can have proof of stake to know how much they hold. You can have two-party escrow where you've both got something to lose. You can have three-party escrow, or you can use oracles. And an oracle is basically someone that sits between the real world and yourself and verifies your ID or something about you. So they can know who you are, they can know where you're from, but not actually publish that to your ID. So trust and reputation is where blockchain technology is going. Adult industry is definitely a good way of getting it there, and payments is the first way of starting. The tokenomics, I can go on about for a long time, but basically you burn to create feedback, you can spend it to consume the API, you need it for the rating algorithm. The two-party escrow is very cool, three-party escrow is less cool but more understood. We've got a marketplace you can feature in, and then state channels and hedging as ways of kind of making it easier for people to interact in the system. The long and short of it is, blockchain is going to change the world, but you need people who have got experience in both industries. We've got the blockchain team, we've also got the experience with adult. Adult industry is very exclusive, but it's also very inclusive. We are pre-press at the moment, we're getting heaps of press. The Sydney Morning Herald, which is where we're from, is our Mars publication. We're at the front of that. We're on Bloomberg, Forbes, sort of all starting in the last week or two. We just closed $1.5 million last night from a fund that's going to be announced in the next week. We have a team of 18 actual people working full-time across Sydney, the Philippines, London, and soon to be LA. Our roadmap is the fact that we know the industry and we can roll out within them. We've got that across cam sites, across content sites, across escort sites, across dating sites, across goods and apparel sites. There's a graph about how we're better than our competitors, but it's fairly boring. In terms of where we're going, the foundation's holding 40% of the tokens. They don't vest for more than 2 years. They can only use 25% per year. Staff and advisors also don't vest for 18 months. Existing investors in the rendezvous business don't vest for 18 months. Pre-sale don't vest for 3 months, and then have a 12-month period, which is also there. Normal budget, boring graph, which I can go into more detail on. Questions?
We do have a couple of minutes if anyone has questions.
Nope.
Good.
Well, we have
Yes.
one question over here, actually.
Were you at the Internext show in Las Vegas?
Yeah, Internext,
Good to
AVN.
see people,
So
it's
this,
totally broken, as you said. Are they hot on this?
that picture there, that's Internext.
Okay.
It is, like the industry is desperate, they know it's broken, they know they need the next thing. It's a confusing space because there's everyone in the world going, how do we invest, or going to the industry and going, we're crypto, trust us. So unless you already know the industry or you establish that trust, it's difficult to get in. But they do know payments are broken, they know the fees they pay. Cam sites take on average 60 to 80% of every transaction. People know that needs to be fixed, but it's been so difficult until now because it's relied on banks and not crypto, that they're very willing.
So you offer a better deal than Bitcoin and the things that they can't.
So our competitors are SpankChain, Tickcoin, Jizzcoin, there's a couple of others. They're focused just on the payments. We're probably comparable from a technical standpoint. The trust and reputation is where we're going, but also we have a better reputation because we're not called that. We're called Intimate. That's us in a room with them. That's not us putting a set of hits on a website and trying to get heaps of cash for it.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.